This is a CBC podcast.
Hey, I'm Michelle Parisi, the woman behind Alone, A Love Story. Season 3 is coming out on February 5th. Love, sex, travel, motherhood, it's all in there. You don't expect anything less from me by now, do you? So put on some tea, make some space under the blankets, and get ready to hunker down with the final season of Alone, A Love Story.
Taken here by Jordin Tootoo, able to break in. Tootoo shoots, he scores!
Tansei, Anine, Boujou, hello and welcome. This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. It's played on the streets, on frozen lakes and rivers, and on ice rinks all across the country. We watch it, argue about it, and obsess over it. Yes, I'm talking about the good old game of hockey. Our heroes lace up skates and glide their way into legend. One of those hockey heroes skated his way up the ranks from a frozen pond in the far north to a 13-year career in the National Hockey League. Jordin Tootoo was the first Inuk player to ever make it to the NHL. Today on Radio Indigenous, I'll have an extended conversation with Jordin. We'll talk about the first time he picked up a hockey stick, the last time he put down a bottle, and how both of those things changed his life. This is not your typical hockey interview. Even if you're not a big hockey fan, I hope you'll stay with us to hear some of this.
Well, back in front of the goal, it's gone! Off a skate, just the break the Red Wings needed. Jordin Tootoo in Nashville ties it 2-2. 2-2!
What's up, buddy? It's all yours.
Whoa!
I totally love that kid, losing it when Jordin Tootoo handed him a hockey stick after a game. They called him the Tootoo Train for both his name and for being an unstoppable force on the ice. Wearing his famous number 22 jersey, Jordin Tootoo began his hockey journey on a patch of frozen lake in Rankin Inlet. His 13-year career in the National Hockey League began with the Nashville Predators in 2003 and ended in October with the Chicago Blackhawks. Jordin Tootoo is the first Inuk player to ever make it to the NHL, and since his retirement, he still hasn't stopped. From Nashville to Nain, Jordin is traveling to talk about hockey, sobriety, and life lessons on and off the ice. And I'm happy to welcome him as my guest on Unreserved today. He joins me from Kelowna. Welcome, Jordin.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
In October, you had posted on Twitter this statement. After 220 regular season games with the Wheat Kings and 723 games in the NHL, I have decided to retire from the NHL to focus on giving back to the Indigenous community. Jordin, when did you know you were ready to retire?
Well, I think the last couple of years, I kind of knew my time was coming to an end, and being totally at peace with it. I was able to come to terms with living out my ultimate dream, and that was to play in the NHL. And obviously hockey being in my life since day one, it really hit me when I was in Brandon in October when I read my retirement speech. But I have no regrets, leaving the game on my own terms and fulfilling my ultimate dream for, over 13 years.
Who gets to ever fill their ultimate dream for 13 years, right?
Takes a lot of hard work, sacrifice. It doesn't come easy.
So take me way back to when you were just a little Inuk kid skating on the lake in Rankin. Do you remember when you first picked up that hockey stick?
I sure do. I was probably around just a little over 3 years old, and my father and my brother Terrence, there's a lake right in the middle of Rankin Inlet called Williamson Lake, and every fall, once that lake was thick enough, my father would walk us down to the lake, minus 20 outside. And by the time we got to the lake, our skates were frozen, our gloves and all that. But didn't take long to warm up, and that free and easy feeling of skating in the wind, and it's hard to describe.
Did you play with was this a community thing, or was it specific to your family?
No, it was a community thing. Basically, whoever showed up, we put the sticks in the middle, and off we went.
When did you separate from the pack, as it were?
Well, I think it wasn't until I was 13, 14 years old when I had an opportunity to go to a couple tournaments down in Yellowknife, playing local tournaments. Coaches picked me out and asked if I was willing to come down and go to a couple tournaments in Edmonton. A head started to turn, and people were talking about me.
Yeah. And in fact, you moved down to Alberta when you were 13 to play AAA hockey. Then you were signed to the Brandon Wheat Kings in 1998. At what point did you realize that this career in the NHL was achievable?
Well, to be honest, probably not until I was 18, 19 years old. Not having playing organized hockey growing up, and then getting thrown right into the fire at 13, 14 years old. I thought that was the NHL for me, playing AAA Bantam, and then, at 15 playing junior A hockey. So, and then eventually moving on to Brandon, and it wasn't probably 2 years into my time in Brandon where, I started really focusing on bettering my game, and but obviously being hit hard with a lot of off-ice issues was tough to overcome.
Yes, certainly you've faced a lot of challenges and a lot of loss in your career. But speaking of which, you weren't the only Inuk player. Your older brother Terrence played professionally as well and spent time playing for the Roanoke Express in the Ocean Blizzard. But you grew up in the game together. What was it like to play and share that hockey dream with your brother?
It was an amazing experience. Terrence being 3 years older than me, he was my idol, my mentor. Someone that I looked up to on a daily basis, and he paved the way for our people. He led by example, and he worked hard every day, and he also worked side jobs away from the rink. It just showed what kind of guy he was, character guy, hardworking guy, and I fed off of that. And
what was the greatest lesson that your brother has taught you?
He always said, it's everyone's fighting a fight we know nothing about, and it's just about being kind to one another. We worked hand in hand, and like I said, he always led by example. He wasn't a guy who talked a lot. He just showed you how to do it the right way, and he made me who I am today, and I couldn't be prouder.
Do you have a favorite memory?
Favorite memory? Terrence and I, we fought a lot.
As brothers will.
As brothers will, yes. We fought a lot, but it was a love-hate relationship. As soon as we were done fighting, he would always give me a hug and ask if I'm okay. And but I think having the opportunity to play on the same team, on the same line as him in OCN, and winning a championship, at 15 years old, it was an amazing time for me. For Terrence and I, it was me and him against the world. We always knew we had each other's back, no matter whether it was on the ice or off the ice. And growing up idolizing him and being able to lace up the skates every day next to him was, something that no one can ever take away from me.
Which made his loss even more devastating for you.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us what happened to your brother?
Well, I think a a lot of people know the story behind it. Terrence was a guy who dealt with stress, and also me with alcohol. We were brought up in a household where alcohol was abundance, and I think as young kids you learn by watching, and Terrence and I, we drank a lot. I think with suicide you'll never know the answers, but what I can gather is he felt that there was a lot of pressure on him, and he just didn't know where to turn to or who to talk to, and sometimes you don't see light at the end of the tunnel, and we talk about the communication being huge for our people. We a lot of us don't know how to talk about our feelings and express our feelings, and knowing that what I know now, I only wish that we were able to talk about our feelings and express our feelings. And it was a very sad day for the Tootoo family, for the population across the north, because Terrence was a leader.
Yeah.
This is why I'm doing what I'm doing, to show people that we all make mistakes. That's life.
Yeah.
It's about getting back up on your 2 feet and being able to be open and honest.
Losing somebody to suicide is absolutely devastating. I'm so sorry for that loss.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think a lot of us in remote communities, on reserves, everyone is affected by the loss of a loved one. We all know it's a national epidemic, and if I could help one or two kids when I do my community visits get out of that mindset, and then I'm a happy camper.
Yeah. In fact, your book All the Way is a sort of honoring to him.
Yes, it is. Terrence left me a note. It said, "Jor, go all the way. Take care of the family. You are the man, Terrence." And so, I just want to honor my brother and make sure his legacy will live on forever.
That's beautiful. And in fact, that year you had the best statistical season of your career in Brandon. How did playing hockey help you through that immense grief?
Yeah, if it wasn't for the game of hockey, I don't think I would have stood a chance. Hockey has always been an outlet for me and for me and my brother. I think that bond in the dressing room, that brotherhood, no one could ever break that. And for me, I knew that if I stuck with hockey, that as time would go on, I would be able to heal. And, when you're around, people that love you, it makes it somewhat easier. But at the same time, this is our ultimate dream was to play in the NHL. And, if I decided to stop playing then my brother's wishes wouldn't be fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. The next year, on October 9th, 2003, you did go all the way. You became the first Inuk player to play in a regular season in the NHL when you suited up with the Nashville Predators. Let's take a listen to that.
Jordin Tootoo, Nashville Predators. 2001
That's a clip that aired on CBC North in Inuk Tootoo from your very first NHL game. What is it like to hear that now?
It's surreal.
I can hear you smiling.
Yeah, it's everything has to fall into place, and it's all about timing and hard work. And like I said, you gotta sacrifice a lot of your life and what you love to do. And for me to be given that opportunity, it was just a matter of me seizing it and doing whatever it took to crack the lineup. And when David Poyle called me into his office at the end of training camp to congratulate me, I had a few tears and automatically thought of my brother, and here was the big day going to happen on October 9th, 2003, and definitely dedicated that whole day and evening to my brother.
Oh, that's amazing. You're giving me the feels right now. You're listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild in a conversation with former NHL player Jordin Tootoo. Did you listen to music while you were doing your pre-skates and warm-ups? What did you like to listen to?
I think every hockey player listens to music, but for me it was rock and roll. Thoroughly enjoyed listening to the Tragically Hip. Pearl Jam, the good old music, rock and roll.
Some AC/DC in there?
Oh, absolutely.
See, I'm liking you more and more by the minute. Now, earlier we heard a clip of your first game that was broadcast in Inuk Tootoo. As the first Inuk player, what impact did your entering the NHL have at home?
Well, I think for me at 20 years old, I didn't really quite understand the impact that I would have on the whole territory of Nunavut, Northwest Territories. And
further, all Indigenous people across Canada.
Yeah, and, I wasn't taking anything for granted and just soaking it all in. It wasn't probably up until 3 or 4 years into my sobriety when I really started to understand the significance of my role in the Indigenous population. So with clarity and content in my own skin, I was able to, sit back and reevaluate everything and kind of have a better understanding of the role model that, I am amongst our people.
And now you look back on it, why do you think it's important for Inuk kids to see Inuk hockey players?
Well, it gives them hope. A lot of our remote communities, a lot of these young kids feel like they're stuck. And, for me to pave the way a little bit for them and to show them that, it's okay to leave home. Home's always going to be home. Sometimes we live in a bubble, and it's hard for a lot of us to get outside of that bubble. And, for me, I sacrifice, my time with my family and being out on the land and hunting and fishing and all that. But I get to do it, in the off season, and that's a trade-off. And now, like I said, home's always going to be home. I'll have more opportunities to get up there.
And while you were living that dream, and, a dream for many young kids across the country, as you said, there were many obstacles. In your book, you wrote about one of them, and that being the racism you faced throughout your career. At the professional level, this is something you've talked about, something PK Subban has talked about. What kinds of things did you hear on the ice?
A lot. I mean, obviously I get chirping in hockey and, things get heated and emotions run high and whatnot. But, as professionals, even, amateurs, there's a line you don't cross, and that's getting into, personal issues or family issues. For me, is my sobriety, right? Like a lot of guys, well, I wouldn't say a lot of guys, a few guys would chirp me about picking up another drink, maybe I might play better, just stuff like that. It's just uncalled for, taunting, racial slurs. It's unfortunate that at the professional level it happens. I think in learning in my sobriety, being proud of who you are and where you come from gives you that inner peace. And for me, it's, my cultural and traditional backgrounds is, I always told myself that, it's not me that's the problem. People who attack you racially, obviously they're dealing with a lot of issues themselves. And, I would just use it as constructive criticism to motivate me to be a better person.
Mm-hmm. Every year as kids head to community clubs to start their hockey seasons, there's still reports of these racial slurs being yelled at really young players. Is this something that you hear from kids?
Well, I was obviously I was a kid once too, and yeah, it's goes to show you that parents, have a huge impact on the way their kids act, and sometimes a lot of these kids don't really know what they're saying, but they've heard mom and dad maybe say a few comments about it, and like I said, kids see and listen to everything that we're doing as parents. So for me, I ended one cycle to start a new cycle for my family, and to give them an opportunity to me be present and be around with a clear mind.
Yeah. One of the things you were known for was how tough you are both on and off the ice. But as you said in a recent interview with CBC, that the toughest fight that you've ever faced was with yourself. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, we all talk about the brain being the strongest muscle in your body. It's your engine. Sometimes your brain can distract you in many different ways, and for me, it wasn't necessarily the physical toughness. It was more on the mental side of the game and of the way I grew up, that I was able to exert myself to levels that probably not a lot of other players can. And I was taught, it's mind over matter. When you give yourself positive affirmations, anything's possible. And that's how I always looked at it. And, anytime I go hunt down a puck or get in a fight, I always told myself I'm going to win this battle. It just gives you that extra little boost.
Yeah. You had turned to alcohol, in fact, to deal with many of your issues and challenges. When did that start for you?
Well, I think, I picked up my first drink when I was 14 years old. Like I said, it was around the house quite often, and, obviously every kid wants to experiment, and, my days in juniors, it probably escalated a little bit more, and then moving on into the NHL, being 20 years old, 21, living on your own, basically no one looking after you, I think it really escalated even more, and trying to deal with the passing of my brother and blocking everything out, it just intensified and got worse, and came to a point where it was either my career or eventually be 6 feet under, and I, chose to end one cycle to start a new cycle.
For certain. You wrote about that moment you knew you had to quit drinking. What was it?
Well, it was my love for the game, right? And obviously my brother taking his own life under the influence of alcohol really impacted my view of overcoming that struggle. For any man to show weakness, I grew up in a household where no man shows weakness or cries, and so I came to a point where just came crashing down, and I said, you know what, I need help. I admitted I had a problem, showed weakness, I was vulnerable, and it was the best opportunity, best gift that was ever given to me at that age.
You're listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Dearchild. With me on the show today is Jordin Tootoo, the first Inuk hockey player to play in the National Hockey League. Jordin retired from pro hockey in October, and he's here with me sharing a candid conversation about overcoming the loss of his brother, struggles with alcoholism, and how he's using his story to inspire the next generation of hockey dreamers. Jordin, you mentioned that you couldn't show weakness growing up and that you were in a pretty macho environment playing professional hockey. And that factored into your struggle to get help with alcoholism. What was the breaking point for you?
The Nashville Predators, David Poyle and Barry Trotz, calling me into the office and saying, look, we care about Jordin Tootoo, the person, not the hockey player. We care about your well-being. We know that you abuse alcohol, and I was in denial, and I think that was really the turning point where I decided that it was time for me to get help.
Now, 8 years later, you are sober, a former professional hockey player, focused on giving back to Indigenous community. What does that giving back look like?
Well, it's in sobriety, a lot of people think it gets easier. Trust me, it's a grind. The first couple of years for me, it was tough. I didn't realize how many people I affected throughout my drinking days. And like you said, it's been a little over 8 years, and I wouldn't have what I have now if I didn't change my life. I have a beautiful wife, Jennifer. We have 2 healthy girls, Sienna and Avery, that are my Stanley Cups. It's just been a thrill and a joy every day to be around them, and just to be a part of their life on a daily basis. My wife Jen has been through thick and thin with me and by my side, and I count on her every day to lift me up and to help guide me through some of the toughest days.
Yeah. What do those tough days look like for you?
I'm able to focus on the positive side of things more now, with having a lot more clarity and better understanding of the meaning of life. And I feel that for me it feels right, and to give back to our Indigenous population, our Indigenous communities, to show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We all make mistakes. It's not easy. Talk about addiction, it's not about drugs or alcohol. It's the absence of self-worth. And for me, once you recognize that, through hard work, connection, and determination, that self-worth is you're able to get that back by peeling back the layers of trauma and all that, day by day, and just eventually you become at peace with yourself. It's hard, but it's rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been laying the groundwork for, giving back to community for a while. In 2012, during the NHL hockey lockout, you returned to Rankin Inlet and hosted the first Team Tootoo hockey camp for the local kids. Now that you're a few months into your retirement, what have you been doing?
Spending a lot of time, daddy duties with my kids. But no, it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, like I said, I was able to walk away from the game on my own terms, and I've recently been touring around doing speaking engagements across Canada here, and talking about the mental health side of things and suicide prevention. Basically telling my story, and showing a lot of these kids that I've lived their life, I've lived that life, and I've come out on top, and if I can do it, you can do it. And like I said, it's about giving them hope.
For sure. Earlier you had mentioned that if you could save 1 or 2 kids and turn them away from that darkness, that it's worth it for you. What do kids tell you?
Yeah, you know what? It's been a tremendous response. I feel the engagement with the crowd. Everyone's tuned in, which is a lot of times with young teenage kids. Their filters go up after 5-10 minutes. It's kind of hard to tell my life story in 10 minutes. So, for them to be engaged in the conversation, and I always make sure I have time to conversate with them at the end of each speaking engagement, signing autographs, and I see a lot of uplifted kids, which is great.
Yeah. In your book, you talk a lot about your connection to the land. the beauty of Rankin Inlet and Nunavut. Why is the land so important to you?
Well, I grew up hunting and fishing. My father was, and still is, a hunter. He was born and raised out on the land, and I just feel that, our people, our First Nations, Indigenous peoples we were meant to be out on the land, and that's where we connect with each other. All the materialistic things that go on, it doesn't matter out there. The little things matter. And that's where over the last, really 20 years since I left home, when I get home, I always make sure that we spend 4 or 5, 6 days out there just to reevaluate my life and just sit down in silence and listen to the birds and the wind and all that. It's just, for me, it's soothing.
This is Unreserved on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169 and Native Voice 1. I'm Rosanna Deerchild. With me on the show today is the first Inuk player to play in the NHL, Jordin Tootoo. Jordin, I have a question I want to play you from a listener. It comes from Eli Langille, who is 6 years old. He lives in Plantagenet, Ontario, and he plays hockey for the St. Isidore Eagles. Here's Eli's question.
Una Saku, Eli Una, St. Isidore Eagles. Do you prefer belugas or narwhals?
A hard-hitting question from one of our young hockey player listeners. Eli wants to know if you prefer beluga or narwhal.
Eli, that's a great question, buddy. For me, in Rankin Inlet, where I grew up, we have beluga whales. So I love and I prefer beluga whales. The narwhals are a little more north than us, so I didn't grow up eating narwhal that often, but beluga whale it is, Eli.
I can hear in your voice that you just love to interact with kids. What does that give you?
You know what? It's I was a kid too, and
what?
Anytime celebrity or someone you looked up who came to town, I remember that feeling, right? And for me to just be around it, and now having kids myself, it's a joy and something that I always make sure I have time for.
Yeah, for sure. What's it been like for you post-retirement in terms of your workout schedule? You come from a rigorous exercise schedule. Do you just laze around now, binging on Netflix and eating chips?
No, I think a lot less sleep with the little ones, for sure. Uh-huh. But like I said, when you live a healthy lifestyle, exercise is always in that routine for me. I don't train as hard as I used to, but my wife told me, she said, when you retire, can you still please work out? So I don't want you getting big. I said, no problem, hon. I'll get me out every day.
That's funny. Now, over the course of your career, you played with Nashville, Detroit, New Jersey, and Chicago. Who do you cheer for now, keeping in mind Winnipeg Jets?
Honestly, I don't watch a lot of hockey.
What? Really?
I'll watch the highlights. I couldn't tell you who's leading the league or who's... But yeah, honestly, I think just that mental break has been good for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to go out of my way to sit down and watch a game, but if it's on the highlights, perfect.
Hockey fans everywhere are shocked, and maybe a little appalled. Do you miss the smell of the dressing room, the camaraderie, the weirdness that goes on there?
Well, I play on Thursday nights here with all the ex-pros around here, so I get my fix weekly. I mean, like I said, there ain't nothing like that dressing room feel, right? And as hockey players, I think that will never, ever leave us. So a lot of old guys that I played against in my earlier career. We play on Thursday nights, and yeah, it's just like a bunch of kids in there.
I just want to picture that for a moment. All those old hockey players, as you say, playing on the ice. There's a movie in there somewhere.
They keep telling me, Toots, eventually you're going to come down to our level. So you may be the fastest one out there, but give it 5 to 10 years, you'll be at our level. So yeah.
You'll just be a toot instead of a toots.
Yeah.
So, the game of hockey has certainly changed a lot, even in the course of your career. If you were just coming up as a young player, would you play differently?
Well, I only know one way, right? And that's
the Tootoo train.
Go hard or go home, right? And I'm kind of glad that, I walked away from the game when I did, because I don't know, I don't see a lot of hitting or the rough stuff happening anymore. So
exactly,
I'd probably be suspended more often than not, but very grateful that I got to play the game for over 13 years.
In 2011, you actually made it all the way to the Stanley Cup playoffs, but never got to hoist that cup over your head. But you'll always be the first Inuk player to play in the NHL. What does that achievement mean to you now that you look back?
First of many. Obviously I have a lot of hope in our Indigenous Inuk First Nations population. There's a lot of talented kids out there. When I look back, I got to give full credit to my brother Terrence for leading the way and for showing me, what it took to make it to the next level and to really guide me in my young hockey career and, show me how to be a pro. I get to keep his legacy on by honoring him on a daily basis with my memory.
Beautiful. And for those young players who look up to you as their role model, what do you say?
Boys, go out there, have fun. The game of hockey is a great way to learn a lot of life skills. The inclusion of having multicultural backgrounds in that dressing room is unlike no other experience. We all know what the common goal is, and that's to win championships. And you can't do it by yourself. Be a good teammate. Be a great guy in the dressing room. And to all the girls, this game is yours too. We all know that women's hockey is growing, and it's great to see.
When you think back about your career, what's your favorite memory on the ice?
Halifax, representing Team Canada at the World Juniors, was by far the greatest memory for me. I think that's really where my name became globally known and the Tootoo train arose.
Chugged up that hill.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Jordin, for taking the time to speak to me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Jordin Tootoo is the first Inuk player to play in the NHL. He retired in October of 2018 after playing 723 games in the National Hockey League. That's it for this week's episode of Unreserved. We'll be back in this radio space next week for more community, culture, and conversation. This episode was produced by Stephanie Cram, Kyle Musica, Zoe Tennant, and Anna Lazowski. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at unreserved@cbc.ca or find us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild, coming at you from Winnipeg and Treaty 1 territory. Thank you for listening to Unreserved on CBC Radio 1. Agasay.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.